people are single parents, people are going through divorces, they're going through mental health, they lose a parent, their caregiver. There's a million disabilities out there, but there's also like a million other just circumstantial situations that impact you at work. And how can we not leverage technology to create that same level of personalization that we have in our lives pretty much everywhere? How do we create that for employers?
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, where I bring you the best and the brightest in the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. Folks, my guest on the show today is Charlotte Dales, co-founder and CEO of Inclusively, the game-changing workforce planning platform helping companies build truly equitable and productive workplaces. With Inclusively's retained platform, employees can anonymously find the support and resources they need to thrive, while companies get powerful data to make smarter investments and boost productivity and retention. And Charlotte's inspiration, her cousin Cameron, who became Florida's first licensed esthetician, that's a tough one, with Down syndrome. Seeing Cameron's success lit a fire in Charlotte to open doors for disabled talent everywhere. And that's exactly what she's doing with Inclusively. And she's combined her fintech and startup chops to revolutionize how employers hire and support talent, creating a more inclusive, transparent, and accommodating hiring process for everyone. We have lots to unpack. Let's get to it. Charlotte, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
Welcome. Currently chatting in Whitefish, Montana. Enjoying the summer out there. We were chatting a little bit beforehand of what's your favorite thing about Whitefish, Montana?
I would say, honestly, going on the lake, but the proximity to being able to go to a national park and go on a boat is probably the reason why people love it here so much.
And that air is world
I
class,
probably
crisp,
shouldn't
clean air.
announce that on here. Too many people are already coming here now.
No, you got it. But your grandparents' house, right? Or in-laws? I'm sorry.
My in-laws, yeah.
Wow. And how long have they been there for?
So they are here only in the summers, but they've been coming out here for probably 25 years.
Love it. They've been there and done that. So let's take it back to the beginning here, and we have a lot to unpack. And as I mentioned in the pre-show, it's about the founder's journey, and I really think it's the origin story. And if you don't mind me asking, because I love to know the DNA of a founder, if you don't mind me asking, what did your parents do for a living?
So my dad is a commercial insurance agent down in New Orleans. So his business insured buildings in, a highly susceptible to hurricanes and floods city. And my mom kind of dabbled in working, but mostly was stay at home and raise my sister and I.
I love it too.
My grandfather started several businesses, and while he was not alive when I started my first business, I definitely think that's a bug I got from him.
It's in the blood. It's in the DNA. But you didn't. Before we even get to Inclusively, you were in corporate America, right? Deutsche Bank, trading floors in London, co-founding Cake Technologies, which I believe American Express acquired. How did those high pressure experiences in finance and tech shape your approach to eventually building a mission-driven business?
So I started, and so I actually I went to University of Colorado and I studied journalism, and I really wanted to be a financial journalist. And so that was kind of what my plan was. And one summer I got to do an internship at CNBC, and this is going to date me, but it was so long ago that my job was, they were filming this campaign called I'm American Business. And they were interviewing all these founders, like the founder of Southwest, the founder of Baby Einstein. And so I would have to go through the entire day of filming and transcribe it manually.
Oh my God.
So I didn't get to go on the shoots or meet the founders myself, but I was watching like 8 hours of footage of them telling their story, like from very nitty gritty level. And it was the first time that I was like, oh, this is like human beings start companies.
That's how it
and
starts.
This is how it gets started. And so that was the first time I feel like I even thought, oh my gosh, this is something that I could do eventually. But I ended up in London working at Deutsche Bank after graduating from college because I just really wanted to live in London. And I knew I wasn't going to get a work permit as a journalist over there as a 22-year-old. And so I sort of shifted the focus I had originally on financial journalism and pivoted it into actually working in finance. So I worked at Deutsche Bank for 5 years. My first year was in '08, so it was an incredibly
Oh yeah.
interesting time to be
Oh yeah.
entering the workforce just in general. But obviously, in the role that I had, it was, just I learned a ton, but I also learned like I don't want to do this. And so after 5 years, my best friend and I quit our job. She was working at Coca-Cola at the time over there and started my first company, Cake Technologies, with, you know, zero background, zero experience, never worked in tech, never built a financial model. We just sort of dove head in and had no kids or responsibilities, so
And
didn't really
amazing
think
what you could do
twice.
with no kids around, right?
Yeah, we did get a lot done. Anyway,
Highly
so yeah,
productive.
we started that company over in London and ended up selling it to American Express after about 4 years of running it. We didn't even raise our Series A. We ended up selling it way earlier than that. But it was at that same time that I came up with the idea for my now company, Inclusively.
Yeah, let's talk about that. And you shared how your cousin Cameron's journey really inspired you. Let's go back to that moment when you knew you had to build a platform like this. And if you wouldn't mind sharing Cameron's story for a moment.
Yeah. So I'd say even before getting to that, when I sold my first company, I was like, I am never doing this again. Like that was so hard.
Like the
We
process of
barely
selling?
made it out alive. What'd you say?
Like the process, the sales process?
No, just the whole thing. I mean, we didn't
Right.
know what we were doing. I feel like people, it sounds very glamorous that we sold our company to American Express. I feel like we landed a crashing plane safely at American
Jeez.
Express. We got incredibly lucky, and we really like pushed really hard to get that over the line. But it was just, we had no experience. Like, so just everything was trial by error. It was just a really, I'd never experienced that level of stress in my life before. And so I was like, I'm never, ever, ever, ever doing this again. And was going to happily just hang out and do my earn out at Amex and live a way less stressful life. But at that same time, my cousin became the first licensed facialist in the state of Florida with Down syndrome. She's just a couple months younger than me. So I like grew up alongside her.
Right.
She's always been incredibly just, I don't know if the right word is advanced, but she's always been incredibly like pushing the needle on what people thought she could do. She went to a traditional school. She always, was wanting to participate in like dance competitions. She was just never really holding herself back. And so people really didn't hold her back.
Hmm.
And so her becoming the first licensed facialist in Florida it was like not surprising at all. And her story about how she did it was really cool. She's always been obsessed with hair and makeup, and she always wanted to be a cosmetologist, but at the time, there was no programs for her to get a college degree or a community college degree she would require to actually go to cosmetology school. And so the ARC program, which is a national program, ended up starting a junior college within one of the community
Oh,
colleges in
interesting.
her hometown. And of course, she's like the first person to enroll in it. And it was on a campus that had a cosmetology school. And so one day she just walked over there and was like, I
Hi.
want to go here. And they're like, well, I guess if you can, pass your test, pass the boards, do all the proper process, you can. And so she ended up getting her degree from the junior college, going and getting her, license as an esthetician. And so I went to visit her and go see her work for the first time. And I just noticed how easy it was for her employer to just make some slight adjustments to her working environment, and how, obviously the impact that it had on her career. And so I wanted to figure out how can we leverage technology to make it really, really, really easy for large employers to do this at scale across all the many reasons why people need support. And even more importantly, companies are already investing in so much for their employees. And how do you make sure that those investments are actually aligning to the actual needs of what your employees are looking for?
So first of all, incredible story. And like the heart of it is inspiration comes from anywhere and everywhere. And you never know where it's going to come from, but you saw the opportunity. That's the entrepreneurship DNA. right? You saw your cousin, you saw her challenges, and you saw her accomplishments. You saw how she faced challenges head on and really had the tenacity, like she had it in her to go do what she wanted to do and follow her dreams. But then you talk about how they made certain accommodations. And what were some of those things that they needed to do to ensure that she had a good experience?
It was just so simple. It was, just having written instructions. So having, exactly what she needs to do, not during the service itself, but having written instructions on sort of how does she prepare the room and then how does she disassemble the room when someone goes out. Like that's
Like
something that you should be creating
like
as
for
training
any
anyway.
job, right? For any job, you're gonna have a process there, and especially for things that are, I assume, like Department of Health kind of
Repeatable.
certifications that you need to do. So for what for Down syndrome and how it affects her and what she needs, they were able to have that available, which isn't a
Yeah.
crazy ask. It's not going out on a limb. It's not anything like too labor intensive. They just
No,
had
it's
it.
just yeah, it was just needing to document. I mean, she's, like, very routine oriented, so as long as she knows what the routine is, she can get it done.
So how do you make that connection in your head and say, "Wow, this is the kernel of a potential product and company"? How do you make that next jump?
So I guess looking at, you know, I really started from, like, the mission perspective, and I think it's important when you think about, I was thinking of the end user.
Mhm.
And, for you to make this work within a scalable enterprise setting, you also have to think about the enterprise and what's in it for them. But I would say I didn't really think about that when I was first thinking about it. All I just saw was like she had done something very incredible. It felt and it was perceived as something completely out of the norm to get done. But then when you went and saw it, you're like, wait, why can't more people do this?
Yeah, it's not
Because
that
it's
hard.
not that different. And then I don't know, I think, my mind just I guess from being in tech prior to that just immediately went to like all the different applications. Like you're like, people are single parents, people are going through
Mhm.
divorces, they're going through mental health, they lose a parent, their caregiver. There's, a million disabilities out there, but there's also like a million other just circumstantial situations that impact you at work. And how can we not leverage technology to create that same level of personalization that we have in our lives pretty much everywhere? How do we create that for employers?
Wow. That's that's pretty freaking awesome. And like the mission, like I love just strong mission-driven organizations that are making actual impact and changes. And it's not just there's so many folks where they're not able to ask or get, right? Or they don't know the resource within their
Or they don't know
organization
what to ask
and they don't
for.
know how to ask. And I think the other element too, which makes the Retain platform so interesting, is it makes it easy with to do it anonymously, right? And like
Yep.
why let's talk a little bit why that's such a game changer in workplace inclusion. Is it stigmas?
So
Is it right? Like they feel like they're gonna like their employers are gonna look down on them and say, "Oh man, this person's so busy dealing with a child with a certain condition
yeah,
that
I think
the
mostly it's stigma.
stigma."
And I think the second thing is that, you're expected to disclose incredibly personal information about yourself
Mm,
without knowing what is going to happen on the other side. Like, if you don't have a clear view into what your company does for people in your circumstance or with your challenge, you're basically just taking a risk of saying, I have this issue and not knowing at all what might be on the other side of that
exactly.
or who, might react which way. I mean, it could depend who you're speaking to. But the stats now are, 3 to 5% of people at large organizations will actually go through a true accommodations process, which means like, I'm going to self identify, I have a need. I'm going to get it documented. Oftentimes it has to go with a medical, note, etc. Only 3 to
Diagnosis. Yep.
5% of people do this. But we know that 30% of the existing workforce actually meets the federal definition of having a disability. If you think about
Hmm.
learning disabilities, mental health, etc. So it's a huge gap.
Neurodivergent. Yep.
Yeah. And if you think about this next generation who have been diagnosed way earlier and way more frequently with things like mental health, learning disabilities, and other disabilities, that number is growing even faster. And so that there's a gap between the process that's in place today and, people who actually do need support that aren't asking for it. And then you couple that with the billions and trillions of dollars that large enterprises spend on benefits, products, services, technologies, policies, all for the benefit of their employees to drive productivity and retention. But there isn't data out there that's saying, here's what people need, here's what you offer across all the things that you've invested in, and here's where you have alignment, and here's where you have gaps. People kind of analyze one piece of the problem, like they'll do an employee engagement survey and understand how people feel about the company. And then maybe they'll look at utilization rates of benefits. But like those two things are very much need to be analyzed together. Like not just what are your employees looking for, but what's the root cause? Are they looking for flexible work because they're a caregiver? And might there be like a caregiver benefit that you could support that doesn't require them to have to work remotely? So really getting down to like, what's the root cause behind why people need certain
What,
support?
and let's be very clear here. What is the value prop for the organization?
Value prop for the organization is, why do companies have benefits? Why
It's
have they
retention.
invested in their
It's
employees?
employee
It's for
experience, retention,
productivity and it's
productivity.
for retention. And they're spending so much money on this, but everyone in benefits will tell you that they are, they don't drive as much utilization to these services as they want. And they don't know if it's because people can't find it, or they don't know if it's people don't need it. And so that's sort of the data that's really missing here. So they're investing in it, but they don't even know if it's having the outcome they initially intended.
So what was one of those early stumbling blocks, roadblocks you had? Maybe it was a hypothesis, a theory, a go-to-market approach or something that maybe just didn't work or didn't land that you had to pivot from.
Oh my gosh, the whole company. So
Everything.
yes. Well, so this was what I was saying earlier about, I started, as I said, I was like, I'm never doing this again. But then I saw my cousin and I saw an opportunity. But I started from the lens of the end user, like the person I wanted to help. But what you always have to remember is if you want something to be sustainable and not charitable, like if you want to actually fix the problem, you need to figure out how you create an ROI for the person that needs to pay for the product.
Right.
And so we started as a hiring platform for people with disabilities. That was the initial product we launched. We leverage a lot of that same technology we built. We've just expanded the application of it. So what we built was a way for people to type in anything about themselves. We would then be able to deduce what pain points have we identified and then serve up the types of accommodations they could ask for on the job and submit all that information over to the employer. So we grew really quickly because it was the end of 2020. People weren't allergic to the words DEI at that point yet. And
Yeah.
it grew incredibly fast with big companies, Delta, Salesforce, Accenture, and we hit a really good wave. But we saw, even before, probably the macro world saw this, that these teams, it didn't feel sustainable to me. Like it was hard to make the connection to ROI and retention of the employees we were placing because it was so predicated upon them making the hires, which is a slow, like you have
Right.
to get the flywheel going. And so we wanted to figure out, how do we make this more applicable to just everybody? Like, regardless of if you have a disability, people are from different socioeconomic
Of course.
backgrounds. They maybe don't have a mentor. They may be a first generation college grad. They may have, need help with financial literacy. How can we expand the application of this and actually fix the problem internally for companies first with their own employees? Then the hiring part becomes more organic. So I'd say the big pivot for us was one, like recognizing that while the mission of DEI and the mission of my intention of starting this company can still happen, if we're going to be selling to enterprises, we need to have a very clear value proposition to them. And the second piece was we need to help them fix the inside first, or else the hiring thing just continues to be hard to prove out.
Hey everybody, Adam here from the Poscast. Today's podcast is brought to you by the team at Fountain. Fountain is your full-service frontline workforce management platform. I have to tell you, Fountain's offerings are some of the most robust I've seen for any product in the space. They offer full solutions for hiring, managing, and retention. They are truly a one-stop shop focused on the frontline workforce. They also create informative content using their data. For example, they analyze a bunch of data from their fast food chains and created a trend report you could download now on their website. They also have a new ebook out called Frontline Voices. There's a lot to dive into. Certainly check it out. And you could learn more at fountain.com, linked in the show notes. Thank you. Let's get into that a little bit. You've talked about how the universal approach to supporting, workforces. How do you see this shift from like compliance driven, DE&I to a more authentic, proactive inclusion transforming, companies in the next 5 to 10 years?
So I think that one, mental health, learning disabilities, and this next generation are just forcing this to not be a compliance problem and be an employee experience problem, regardless. And so I think that, we took what we built, and there's many, many other, use cases of someone built something for people with disabilities that also just worked better for everyone else. So, Siri, talk to text, all of that
Hmm.
technology was initially built for people with disabilities. The escalator, the curb cut, all these things were initially built with people with disabilities in mind and created a better user experience for everyone. And so, in the same way, we looked at, all we're doing here is we're helping people quantify what challenges they're experiencing at work through their personal information and then matching it to the types of solutions that they could be asking for. And so when you think about that, that could be for anyone. Like, I may not have a disability, but I may have suffered a miscarriage, or I may be going through, caregiving for an aging parent.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different, everyone has their own unique situation that's going to be impacting their work in some way. And so, how can we figure out what those needs are and align them to the investments that are already getting made at the company and help the company make better investments based on that data?
Interesting. So let's dig into that. Data plays a huge role in your platform. How do you balance gathering, valuable insights and quantifying it, and also adding the qualitative insights with also being protecting individual privacy and trust? Like, how do you balance that dynamic?
So, anything that anyone puts into our platform is anonymous. We take the search string. So the way our front end platform works, it integrates with Teams, ServiceNow, all the existing front end infrastructure that companies are using. We're helping them optimize the search or chat query experience. So one, as a employee, I'm able to put in a problem like I'm going through a divorce versus like needing to know what I'm going to look for. And then we deduce what are you looking for based on your problem. But the important part is that you can put anything in there. We're never storing like your name to the search query or to the
Right.
chat
You're not
query.
attaching the name to the data, right?
No,
It's
so we're just
anonymous.
aggregating the insights on what's coming in and then aligning it to what we know the company already has. So it remains anonymous for the employee. We don't even store the data connected to a user ID.
Let's go back for a moment and talk about the elephant in the room. Last week was SHRM, which is the big annual conference. Anyone following
Yep.
along knows their thought.
Are you there?
I was not there. I was there last year, and their listen. Google it, anybody. You can figure out the history. You can see how SHRM itself is moved away from the acronym DEIMB and what it means, and they've kind of come up with their own definition there. But it's changing with politics. It's changing with culture. It's changing just in minds. And I think what scares me is that we're moving away from the true mission. Call it whatever the hell you want, right?
Yeah.
But the pillars are important. The pillars are important here, and we're moving away from that. How do you work? And obviously we're not we're not calling any names out here, but how do you work with these leaders when you're going in and you're pitching, and like how do you separate just performative, like, hey, we're going to have, inclusively come in and talk to us. Maybe we'll bring them on board. We bring them on board for smoke and mirrors and optics versus really embracing it. Like, how do you suss that out? Like when you're talking to a senior leader, like you only want to work, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong here. You're
Yeah.
not just trying to sell to anybody. You want to be a partner to them. You want to make a difference in their company.
Yeah.
And they're just talking shit and they're not, it's sorry, pardon my French, like smoke and mirrors
Yeah.
versus action. And they're just performative. Like what's that line of thought and questions and conversations to
So
get you there? You know what I mean?
yes, I actually, I think a lot that has happened from a political perspective this year as it relates to how we talk about DEI and the importance. is not kind and I don't agree with. However,
Mm.
I will say one of the positive things is there was actually a lot more of what you're talking about, the smoke and mirrors, before this year. People
Mm.
don't have to do the smoke and mirrors anymore. And
They could
so
just ignore it.
exactly. And so I actually think it has created less of a problem from that perspective. I actually think there was, they called it, I guess, greenwashing for the environment. I feel like there was more of that going on actually before this new administration because it was presented as this very altruistic thing that companies were doing. And I think the mission, obviously, the core mission was amazing, but you can't have these almost charitable organizations operating in a for-profit enterprise. It doesn't work like that. And so, we had a few companies that, bought our hiring product and never even onboarded us, paid for it for the whole year. They just wanted to say they were
Say
using
they
it.
had it
Yeah.
fixed.
And I think that that was a lot more actually before this administration
Wait,
because everyone was
and
talking about DEI.
okay, so what do you do in those cases, right? You're a leader of an organization, right? Like it's like, okay, I sold you the car. If you don't want to drive it, that's your decision. But in the same breath, this is a mission driven organization.
Yeah.
What the hell do those
We're also
conversations?
for
What do those
profit.
look
Like
like?
we want
Right?
them to renew.
I want you to use it, embrace
Yes.
it, see the positive results, and renew. Right?
Yes.
Like, how do those
Um,
conversations even start? And like, how do you assess, like, hey guys, are you not using it because you don't know how, and that comes back to us because we didn't onboard you properly, or hey, listen, it's performative over here. You just kind of bought this thing for shits and giggles, right?
I don't think that people really ever bought our product who didn't ever onboard it, did it for purely with the motive of like, we just want to buy
Mm.
this. I think that, there was a big boom on DEI and everyone was, wanting to be able to shout the loudest about it. And I think that people would buy our product without understanding what needed to happen to get onboarded.
Mm.
And at a large company, that can be really problematic because there's like 100 different people that need to, give us authentication keys so
Hmm.
we can pull your jobs on it. It's more like technical, but the idea is that they were out there purchasing, being quick to want to make moves, but then the follow through after, I don't think intentionally was there always to say we just wanted to buy it and say it. But they were kind of given free remit to go do all these things, but there wasn't a ton of follow through on the other end. Like at the end of the day, a DEI organization, like they're not talent acquisition, they're not the tech
Right.
teams that we needed to work with. They're more a champion and an influencer. And I think that's ultimately, what hopefully will turn around in a good way with sort of the changes is that even though it's been a rocky start. I think that, we need this to just be embedded in the company, not a separate sideshow organization. And we need people to be doing it because they see the impact on retention and productivity
Exactly.
and not the altruistic
Ex-
mission is almost like a byproduct of that.
Right. And listen, at the end of the day, right? Like companies are a business, they're a for-profit business. And if your employees are happy and more productive, these are sound investments into it. I want to shift a little bit as we kind of round the corner here and just talk a little bit about the future of work. And your work is really modernizing recruitment with structured accommodations. How do you see this intersecting with the broader trends in skill-based hiring and the push for more, you know, equitable talent pipelines?
So I think this just goes hand in hand with skills-based hiring. Like skills are, hard skills that you can pull out of people, but you may be able to have a skill if you can couple that with an accommodation. So there may be, for example, there are engineers who are blind
Hmm.
and they're able to still be engineers because they leverage screen readers and other assistive technology. And so I think that when you're focused on skills, this just really goes hand in hand. It's skills and like what else do you need to make those skills as useful as possible to our company. And so I think skills based hiring is a great thing. I think that it's not it's not mutually exclusive and a strategy that can just be executed on its own. There's all the other pieces to a human being that are going to make either their skill excel at your company or just be mediocre.
Oof, I love it. So what's next on the horizon? What's the next big mountain to summit for Inclusively?
So we started as a hiring platform. We pivoted to our product Retain sort of at the middle of last year and launched that with Salesforce and started to get that go to market motion going. And I'd say our biggest, focus this year is integrating with as many of the existing HR systems that people are already interacting with because people have platform overload, and really what we're sort of agnostic of what experience you are, using on the front end. We just want to be powering that experience to make it more personalized and to give employers better data.
I
So
love it.
I'd say that's the big sort of push for us. And then we're also partnering with a lot of different brokers and benefits consultants that are helping us resell our product, which has been a great way to align. You're already making all of these investments, like implement this technology and you'll be crystal clear that you're making the right investments.
I love it. Charlotte, you're a mom, a founder, a champion for inclusive hiring. What advice would you give women and parents who want to launch a mission-driven venture but worry about balancing it all? What wisdom would you bestow?
So I've done two companies, one prior to kids and one with kids. And I'd say that, with my first company, I didn't have any other responsibilities. And so it just like completely consumed me.
Hmm.
And I actually think, in a way, having children makes like the journey more enjoyable because you can't just be in work. Like you
Can't avoid them.
physically can't do that.
They're
And
everywhere.
so it's a great like a reason to pull you out. And I actually think you're a better founder and a better leader when you're not just obsessing over, the nitty-gritty every single day. So I'd say that, I will say, not sure if I would have taken the leap the first time had I had kids. I probably would have been a little more cautious, but I think, regardless, you can't look into it that much because honestly, if someone gave me a crystal ball and I could have watched everything that happened in my first company, I would have never done it, like,
None
ever.
of us would. None of us.
Um,
None of us founders would ever, if we had the Back to the Future time machine, and we would never
no,
do
you
that.
wouldn't have ever
Like
been
shit,
like,
that's what I got to
"Why?"
go
Like,
through to
"Why
get to
would
where I
I?"
need.
No.
Jeez.
So, I would say that, you kinda just have to swan dive. Having kids, you just have to always keep them as the first priority, and I actually think I'm more productive now because I
Mm.
just don't have time to not be.
Well, you focus on what's important because your
Mhm.
time is limited. That's really what it's all about. It's priorities.
Yeah, and you can't spiral about things that aren't that big of a deal because you just don't have time to do that. And I
Mm.
actually think I'm a way better founder, not just because this is my second time, but I think I'm more like grounded because I can't just follow whatever problem is in front of me every second of every day like I could in the first company.
Wow. What's keeping you up at night these days?
Um, Honestly, if you asked me that probably a month ago, I'd have like a laundry list of things. We're in a good spot right now. I would say what's keeping me up is, you know, technology is moving so fast. Like AI has just blown the lid off of everything. However, we're selling into enterprises, and enterprises are notoriously slow, especially in a sales process. So I think that just always keeps me up at night because I'm like, I know how fast the world is moving. I know how fast my company moves now with AI. Like, we are building things so much faster than we used to. We have a tiny team, a young team, and we're doing incredible things. And so it's just what keeps me up at night is like, I just know that the clients we're selling into will never move at that pace. And so you always just feel like a little bit like you're not where you want to be because we feel like we're
Mm,
moving so fast, but we're sort of always on the timeline of, our client.
I love it. Charlotte, what's the single greatest piece of career advice that you've received that you pay forward?
Um, you know what? I said earlier that my mom has never really worked, but I actually think the advice she's given me before, not even really knowing she was giving me any sort of work advice, but I think I called her once with my first company and was just completely freaking out. And she was like, "Well," she's like, "you're walking into work today, aren't you?" She's like, "Look down, like your feet are still moving, like one foot in front of the
Mm,
other. Like you're still walking into work. You still have a company today." And I think you just have to have that mindset as a founder. Like you can figure it out, but it's like it's your decision to quit. And I think just always knowing that if you just keep moving forward, you'll something's going in motion.
I love it. And last but not least, Charlotte, if someone from the outside looks at your life resume and your experience and they see that you've, exited companies successfully and you're building incredible things, everyone's definition of success is different. How do you define success, Charlotte Tells?
I don't know. There's like the crude side of me that's like numbers and an exit, which is where very much what you're held accountable to from an investor perspective. But I think the beauty of this company is like I genuinely am hoping I'm making like my kids experience like a better experience because of it. And I think, not everyone has the privilege of being able to find a mission that, they can work on as a career. But I think you can find that in almost any job by the way you treat people and the way you come up with ideas. And so, yeah, I think like ultimately, I hope that, my children feel like when they enter the workforce and maybe they're going through a tough time or they have an issue, that it's like a non issue at work.
I love it. This is an incredible mission and company, and everything behind it you're doing is making workplaces and lives just better. And it's the right way. So kudos to you and the team. Charlotte
Thank
Dales, thank
you.
you so much for joining me on the podcast. Everyone, please check out inclusively.com and check out their industry research report, which we're going to link up in the comments. Where else could folks connect with you? Where could they learn more?
On LinkedIn. I am always on LinkedIn.
Follow Charlotte on LinkedIn. Charlotte, I want to thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast. Guys, if this episode meant something to you, leave a review rating. Goes a long way. Sharing means caring. You know where to find out more at thepodcast.com. Follow us on socials. Folks, I'm trying to amp up this YouTube page. Go over to youtube.com/thepodcast. I got some great content on there. I'm trying to make things happen, folks. Definitely check it out. I appreciate all of your support. Remember, be good to yourself, be better to others, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.